Hey everyone, just going to take a little bit of time in this video to go over the PowerPoint on Chapter 5, Sentence Sense, which is the fourth step in writing. Go ahead and take a look here. All right, so go ahead and start this. All right, so we learned in week 2 all about the first 3 steps in writing. We learned that the first step in writing is to make sure that you have a point and that you stick to that point when you're writing your paragraph. Step 2 is support. You have to make sure that you provide specific and adequate support for that point. Step 3 is coherence. We learned that we have to connect our ideas and organize them in an effective, logical manner, right? Step 4 is looking at the smaller details in terms of sentence sense. Basically means making sure you have free, error-free sentences. All right, so we're going to review how to sort of revise a paragraph. And it's actually kind of a misnomer, really, because what we're honestly doing is editing. Revising refers to more of the bigger picture, making sure that you have a point, making sure that you do have good support and that you do have effective coherence. We're talking about revising sentences here. So we're really actually talking about editing, proofreading. All right, so we want to make sure that we have proper style, effective style, and that we have proper grammar and mechanics. All right, so we're going to cover some of these ideas here in this PowerPoint, and then we will cover quite a few more in the next lesson on grammar and mechanics. All right, so what we're going to cover mostly is using parallelism or parallel structure, using consistent point of view, using specific word choices, using concise wording, and how to vary our sentences. That's sort of what is covered in Chapter 5. I am then going to add on the lessons on grammar and mechanics specifically in the next lesson after this one. So let's go ahead and take a look at parallelism. What we mean by this is that words in a series, so like a list of words, a list of phrases, right, should have parallel structure. You want to balance the items in a pair or a series so that they have the same kind of structure. It will make the sentence clearer, easier to read, and simply more pleasing. You don't really have to worry about this when you're writing your rough draft, right? So when you first write your paragraph or when you move on to essays, you don't necessarily have to worry about using parallel structure right off the bat. It's something you more want to go back and look for as you are in the revision and editing and proofreading stage, right? So while you're looking over the rough draft, you want to see if there are any places that you should revise to try to put, words and ideas into matching structure. And we're going to look at some examples so that you'll kind of understand what I mean by this a little better. All right, so over here on this side, we have some non-parallel or non-balanced sentences. So we have our first example here. I resolved to lose weight, to study more, and watching less TV. Now, do we understand what this sentence is telling us? Yes, we do. There is nothing inherently incorrect about this sentence. However, there are some stylistic issues that kind of disrupt the flow. And it is because we don't have parallel structure. The sentence is not balanced. And you can see where I've put in bold where the problem occurs. Because we have a list of 3 things that this person resolved to do. And they begin that list with a very specific structure: to lose weight, to study more. And then all of a sudden they switch the structure and just have and watching less TV. But we want that structure to be the same throughout that list. So what it really should have been was this over here. I resolved to lose weight, to study more, and to watch less TV. It's a very subtle thing, but when you're using parallel structure, it is a better experience for the reader. We have a couple more examples here. A consumer group rates my car as noisy, expensive, and not having much safety. Well, wouldn't it make more sense to say a consumer group rates my car as noisy, expensive, and unsafe? If you were able to use one word for the other 2 items in the list, wouldn't you want to also use just one word for the 3rd item in the list? Instead of that wordy phrase right here, not having much safety. That just means unsafe. If there is a way to say it with less words and it matches the structure that you have already built, then do that. Lola likes wearing soft sweaters, eating exotic foods, and to bathe in scented bath oil. Well, we can see that the first part, the first item and the second item, we're using those gerund phrases, those ing words. They're not really verbs. They're like a verb form, but they're not full verbs. But we have wearing soft sweaters, eating exotic foods. Why wouldn't we say bathing in scented bath oil? There was no need to change that structure right there. We want it to stay the same. Or single life offers more freedom of choice. More security is offered by marriage. Why would you switch the order? We have the noun, the main noun here. Single life offers more freedom of choice. Why would we change it to passive voice here and change the structure? Shouldn't marriage, because we started off with single life here, why wouldn't we start off with marriage in the second part? Single life offers more freedom of choice. Marriage offers more security. It just sounds better. And it keeps our focus where it needs to be. So that is parallel structure, using parallelism. We also want to make sure that we are staying in a consistent point of view. And the first way we do that is looking at our verb tenses to ensure that those are consistent. You do not want to shift verb tenses unnecessarily. If you begin writing in the present tense, don't suddenly shift to the past tense. Or if you begin in the past tense, don't suddenly shift to the present tense unless there's a reason to do so, right? But if you're writing just a standard paragraph or a standard essay, that's not really like a narrative where you're telling a story, more than likely you're going to want to stay in one verb tense. So we have an example here. The shoplifter walked quickly toward the front of the store. When a clerk shouts at him, he started to run. So we started off in the past tense. The shoplifter walked quickly toward the front of the store. When a clerk shouts at him, why did we switch to the present tense? he started to run. So we kind of went back to the past tense. There's two ways we can fix it. And again, it's really just what are you trying to go for? Do you want to stay in past tense or do you want to remain in present tense? So we have both examples here. So this is staying in the present tense. The shoplifter walks quickly toward the front of the store. When a clerk shouts at him, he starts to run. Or we can say in the past tense. The shoplifter walked quickly toward the front of the store. When a clerk shouted at him, he started to run. It's one of the, staying in with consistent verb tense is one of those things that you'd think would just come naturally. But when we're writing, sometimes our brain just isn't really paying attention to those little things. Or we kind of have a shift in our own thoughts, and that causes us to shift the verb tense, and we don't really see it right away that the shift has occurred at all. We don't necessarily remember in the moment that we had started in past tense and now all of a sudden we're in present tense, or vice versa. So you'd think it would be something that wouldn't happen very often, but it actually does happen pretty often where our writing has inconsistencies with the verb tenses. So again, this is something that hopefully isn't a huge problem and something that you might recognize as you're writing, but it is definitely something that you want to just quickly look for when you're in the revising and proofreading stage. To just check the paragraph, check the essay, make sure that you have remained in the correct verb tense, whatever that might be, but it needs to be consistent. Same thing with our next example here. Along with consistent verb tense, we also want consistency with our pronouns in terms of point of view. Pronouns should not shift point of view, or at least not unnecessarily. You want to be consistent in the use of first, second, or third person pronouns. So we have two examples here. The first one, I enjoy movies like The Return of the Vampire that frighten you. Okay, well, what that sentence is actually saying is, I enjoy these types of movies because they frighten you. That's probably not what I mean. I probably mean, I enjoy movies like The Return of the Vampire that frighten me. Right? Because that's what I really mean. I enjoy the movies that I find scary. I'm not saying I enjoy these movies because you find them scary. So why would I have used this pronoun over here? We can kind of understand why we would have used, movies like Return of the Vampire that frighten you. The problem was that we started it off with that first person pronoun, so we have to be consistent. So it's either, change the first person pronoun here or change the third person pronoun here. I'm sorry, second person pronoun. So I enjoy movies like The Return of the Vampire that frighten me, or you enjoy movies like Return of the Vampire that frighten you, right? Or how about the second example? As soon as a tourist enters Arlington National Cemetery, where many of America's military heroes are buried, you begin to realize how costly the price of liberty is. Well, we started off with a third person pronoun up there, or a noun, tourist, right? That's a third person noun. But yet, when we get to the pronoun, we have switched it to second person. And that doesn't work. It's not consistent. As soon as a tourist enters Arlington National Cemetery, where many of America's military heroes are buried, he or she begins to realize how costly the price of liberty is, right? We could use the they, the all-inclusive they, as well. But technically, we used a singular noun up there, a tourist. So technically speaking, our pronoun needs to be a singular pronoun also. Hence the he or she. All right, so again, just one of those things happens in the haste of writing. You just need to make sure that you are proofreading your writing carefully to catch these types of errors. They're gonna occur. This isn't necessarily about not understanding grammar and mechanics. These types of errors really are just about writing quickly and your brain not being able to sort of keep up, or your hands not being able to keep up with your brain, could be the other way around. These small errors, just they happen. You just need to be aware that, all of us are prone to these errors, and that is why it's so important to review what you've written before you submit it. Look for these types of errors so that you can catch them and fix them. All right. Another thing that we want to do to ensure that we have very clear, effective sentences is to use specific words rather than vague, general words. Specific words create pictures in the reader's mind. It engages the reader. It helps keep their interest, and it helps make your meaning much clearer. So you want to use specific word choices whenever possible. So we have a few examples here. We could say the boy came down the street, but why not say Theo ran down Woodlawn Avenue? Use specifics if you can. A bird appeared on the grass. How about a blue jay swooped down onto the frost-covered lawn? She stopped the car. How about Jackie slammed on the brakes of her Impala? Right? If it is possible and appropriate, use specific words instead of vague general words. This kind of relates to our lesson on support in week 2, where you want to support your point with specific and adequate detail. Using specific and adequate word choices will help with that as well. Right? So, some of the strategies that can help you revise your sentences effectively: using parallelism or parallel structure, making sure you have a consistent point of view, both in terms of your verb tenses and your pronoun usage, and using specific words. We also want to use concise wording, and that will be covered in one of the mini lessons under the grammar and mechanics lesson. You also want to vary your sentences, sentence length, sentence structure. That will be covered in one of the mini lessons under grammar and mechanics as well. We will also cover sentence fragments, run-on sentences and comma splices, and modifiers in the mini lessons. So you can go ahead and reach out to me if you have any questions about anything here in this PowerPoint, or go ahead and move on to the lessons under grammar and mechanics, and then you can reach out to me with all of your questions if you happen to have it. But yeah, that's it for this one, and you can go ahead and move on.